The world comes together at a dialogue meeting to discuss solutions to global challenges under the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. The founder of the World Economic Forum called for immediate action.
I believe this is the best time to reset our policies and to work jointly for a peaceful and prosperous world.
女士们、先生们、朋友们。
Chinese President Xi Jinping shared his sentiment in his special address, calling for global action, response, and cooperation to face challenges as the world goes through what some experts have called the worst recession since the end of the Second World War.
单打独斗。
The problems facing the world are intricate and complex. The way out of them is through upholding multilateralism and building a community with a shared future for mankind.
世界上的问题。
He called upon countries to step up coordination in macroeconomic policies, abandon ideological prejudices, and follow the path of peaceful coexistence and mutual benefits. He said public health emergencies like COVID-19 may very well recur, and global problems have to be solved with unity and consultation instead of confrontation.
多边主义的要
To
义
build small circles
是国际
or
上的
start
事，
a new Cold
大
War,
家共同商量着办。
to reject, threaten,
世界
or
前途命
intimidate
运
others,
由各国
to willfully impose decoupling, supply disruption,
在
or
国际上
sanctions,
搞小圈
and to
子、
create
新冷
isolation
战
or estrangement
排斥、
will
威
only
胁
push the world
恐
into
吓他
division
人
and even
动不动就搞
confrontation.
脱钩、断供、
We cannot
制
tackle
裁
common challenges
人
in
为
a
造成
divided
相
world,
互隔离甚至
and
隔绝
confrontation
只
will
能把
lead
世
us
界
to a
推
dead
向
end.
分裂甚至对抗。
Xi attaches great importance to the international system centered around the United Nations, as well as global order based on international law. He stressed that the world needs to give full play to the role of the World Health Organization. He also called for reforms to the World Trade Organization and the global financial system. He urged parties to deliver on the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change and promote green development. And Xi reiterated China's commitment to the world.
We will follow a new development philosophy and foster a new development paradigm, with domestic circulation as the mainstay and domestic and international circulations reinforcing each other.
He said China will continue to implement the win-win strategy of opening up its economy to bring more opportunities to other countries and give impetus to global economic recovery and growth. Experts say 2021 will be the crucial year and hope that all sides involved in the conference can work together to rebuild trust, boost cooperation, pool ideas, and contribute to the resolution of global issues. 郑义斌 CGTN, Beijing.
And also attending the meeting is UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He has called for global cooperation for a fair and sustainable recovery from the coronavirus pandemic.
We can use our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic to move from fragilities to resilience. But all these threats, all these obstacles to progress demand dialogue and collaboration.
At Davos, participants are also discussing strategy for bringing the coronavirus pandemic under control. Now, our reporter Juliet Mann has this report.
It's time to look at the big picture and work collectively. That's the message from day one of Business Bonanza, the Davos Agenda. There's a shared determination from world leaders and financial heavyweights to help drive a robust, inclusive, green recovery from the global emergency. That starts with finding common ground on health.
It makes it extremely problematic to adequately address a public health crisis when you're in the middle of a profound degree of divisiveness in the country. When public health issues become politically charged, like wearing a mask or not becomes a political statement, you cannot imagine how destructive that is to any unified public health message.
Charitable organisations say the mega-rich have already recovered from pandemic losses, but it could take the poor a decade, which is why vaccinating the world is vital.
It's important for governments and people around the world to shift the mindset to health is an asset that you invest in as opposed to a cost you minimize. And of course, you try to improve equity because typically, especially in case of infections, we're only safe when everybody is safe, and that's why at AstraZeneca we decided to provide this vaccine to everybody around the world at no profit and as quickly as possible.
The Biden administration's latest moves to rejoin global pacts and organizations have been well received by the Davos community, but major challenges remain. Davos this year cannot be the usual networking fest it's built its reputation on. But this is the first opportunity of 2021 for business leaders to come together to talk about jobs, the green economy, and how to shape future sustainable growth. The forum expects to hold its annual meeting in person in May in Singapore. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
Now, for more insights, now we're joined in the studio by Mr. Einar Tangen, current affairs commentator, and Professor John Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome to Global Watch, gentlemen. First of all, Einar, it's so kind of within expectations that Xi's mentioning of the Cold War mentality has become a hot term. Almost every major media reported the speech, especially this part. Why are they so interested in this topic?
Well, there are three takeaways from what Xi Jinping said. And the first one was he covered in almost exactly the same ground he did 4 years ago when he addressed this economic forum. Second, he made an invitation of multilateralism. And third, he served up a historical warning that these kind of this small-minded action and protectionism has never served anybody. Unfortunately, everyone in the press decided that this was a threat and that this is the only thing they could serve on. The irony here is, let's say Obama had given this speech, take out the little bits that said, China, he would have been lauded. This would have been, visionary, talking about creating a new sense of the world. Unfortunately, whenever anyone from China says it, it's automatically bad.
Even if calling for multilateralism, what's wrong with that?
I challenge anybody to actually read the speech and come up with anything other than let's work together.
Yeah, because when he mentioned the Cold War, actually he said starting a new Cold War will only push the world into division and confrontation. So that's not, stressing on the concept of Cold War, just to.
Well, we know this. We went through a Cold War with Russia. It didn't help things. Only when things were normalized were things able to get better. So he wasn't making a threat. He was simply reminding people that historically these things are not good for for the world society. That if the world is going to go forward, things like the WTO, the United Nations, these are the multilateral institutions that can make things better.
Then what are their concerns, Professor Gong? What are their concerns over the issue? And what actually can be done to address this issue and to get rid of the confrontations?
I think what President Xi was talking about is against the backdrop of the change in Washington, D.C., that the Biden administration is calling for sort of a alliance approach against China, the words against China. And I think President Xi is basically issuing a warning that this is something that is not very palatable from China's perspective. Wouldn't like to see a small circle of a few countries that is sort of united against a particular country. As Anna said, historically that model has never worked. So in that context, I think President Xi is talking about every country working together for a broader, larger, higher agenda that is to working for the common good of the entire humankind. So I think this is where he's coming from, basically.
Currently, the common good for humankind is to fight against the common enemy, the pandemic, COVID-19, actually. And this year's theme is to rebuild. A crucial year to rebuild the trust. But does this crucial year only mean the pandemic, or the problems actually reflected by the pandemic?
I think it's more than just the pandemic. For example, the pitfalls associated with the previous model of globalization that is in particular exposed by this pandemic is something that we have to address. I think the concept that this Great World Economic Forum was talking about, the Great Reset, right? They're talking about this thing, is very much against that backdrop that there are issues associated with globalization, too much emphasizing the corporate interests, ignoring the the people, the society, the very adverse distributional effect, income equality issues associated with globalization. All these things have to be addressed in the future, and this is what they really mean by a reset. So I think this is the future that we're talking about. Emphasis more on the people side, more on the in the interest of all the countries involved in globalization.
I know China was the only major economy last year to see positive growth, and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, said China's COVID response and economic policy actually contribute significantly to its economic rebound. First of all, let's take a listen to what the IMF really said.
I think policy played a very important role for China's recovery, and the recovery is remarkable in the sense that it has been ahead of other economies of China's size. So policymakers did at least three things. They helped to contain the virus, they worked to mitigate its impact on the economy, and then as the virus was under control, macroeconomic policy efforts played a very important role in supporting the recovery. So this is why we think we do have a recovery that will continue into 2021, coming strong out of especially the fourth quarter last year.
Well, indeed, actually, another matter that had been discussed very seriously by the major media yesterday was China overtaking US to become the largest recipient of foreign direct investment last year. How do you see that phenomenon? Do you think this momentum will continue to in the long term, or just the comeback of the pandemic?
Well, long term, we'll have to see. China certainly has demonstrated an ability over the last 40 years to continually plan and execute and take care of its economy. But, I think you have to put this into a larger context. What you have with COVID-19 was kind of the final straw in the recognition that a lot of the metrics, institutions, etc., that were created after World War II are no longer valid. They have to be changed. And we're coming into a digital economy, a highly technology-driven. We have social media. These are things that weren't even dreamed about at that period of time. The metrics, GDP, doesn't work anymore. It's kind of a general term, and no one believes it. No economist believes it, but they continue to use it. So at this point, China has already demonstrated that the reality is that China is doing very well, and the rhetoric from other countries, though, is that China has the wrong system, so therefore they shouldn't be doing as well. Whereas they have the right system, but some reason they are not able to achieve the kind of positive results as China. So there's this kind of conflict, this schism between what people are saying and the reality, because it's not just FDI itself, it's the fact that China is able to offer a steady and predictable business environment as opposed to many countries outside.
What's your take, Professor Gong?
Well, I think this year is a little bit different in the sense that China is doing very well in terms of tackling this pandemic, and also the interest rates are a little bit higher than the rest of the world. So you see a massive amount of capital pouring into China. Now, I surely hope this would be a long-term phenomenon.
Why do you say that? Why are you saying you're hoping? You're not confident enough?
Well, I think there are things that are sort of working against that trend. For example, the outward FDI is a very strong trend that we've been seeing for all along. But overall, China still remains to be a very attractive market for investors. This is mostly based on the fact that this is the world's largest consumer market. China's economy is poised to surpass the United States in, say, 8 or 10 years, depending on who we're talking to. But overall, no company can ignore the largest market in the world right now. This is like a snowballing effect going on right now. It's a strong momentum. It's very difficult to stop it. It won't stop. Chinese consumers are getting richer. They are more willing to spend money. The middle class is expanding. And this is a golden opportunity that nobody can ignore. So I would say that it's not all forces working in direction. These are counteracting forces going on at the same time. It's a very complex economic system. But overall, I would hope that in the net effect would be more foreign direct investment into China in the future.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your analysis into this. Aina Tangan, current affairs commentator, and also Professor Zhang Gong from University of International Business and Economics. Thank you very much.